chapter of Mr. Baseball, the story of Connie Mack. It was a day in 1949. Connie Mack was being honored for his lifetime of service to baseball. To him, the applause of the fans was as familiar as their catcalls. In his long, eventful career, he had heard both often. Born during the Civil War, Connie Mack began playing baseball when Army forts still guarded the western frontier against raiding Indians. By 1886, when folks still rode in buggies and horse cars, he was a professional ball player, catcher for the Washington Senators. 1894, Gentleman Jim Corbett was fighting George Courtney. By then, Connie Mack was manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. He went on to become manager and part owner of the Philadelphia Athletics. In 1902, when the Wright Brothers were solving the problems of flight, Connie Mack won his first pennant. It caused far more excitement than the first plane flight in history. Then in 1910, for Connie Mack, it was a crucial pennant and World Series. He had gone deep into debt to build a new baseball stadium. To keep the seats filled with paying fans, he needed a championship team. Mack had done his best. His pitching star was the great Chief Bender. Another fine pitcher, Jack Coombs. Jack Barry played shortstop. Eddie Collins was at second. And Home Run Baker at third. Although underdogs in that World Series, the A's trounced the Cubs. Connie had his first World Championship. The Philadelphia fans went wild. Next year, cheered by the fans, Connie led the A's to another pennant. In the World Series of 1911, his opponents were John J. McGraw and the New York Giants. Connie's men won. He repeated the victory in 1913, again beating McGraw and the Giants. That made Connie Mack the first manager in baseball to win 3 World Series. The future looked good. You were happily married and ranked with the greatest managers of all time. But a year later, it was all swept away. A rival league tempted your players with large salaries. Facing financial ruin, you sold your stars. It was that or bankruptcy. Eddie Collins went first. Sold to the Chicago White Sox. Jack Barry sold to the Boston Red Sox. Home Run Baker sold to the Yankees. Your famous infield gone, the A's plunged to the bottom of the American League. With the Athletics in last place, empty seats at the stadium, the fans called you a team wrecker. You didn't argue. Quietly, you began to rebuild. In the process, you made mistakes. A rookie pitcher named Babe Ruth was offered for sale. Cheap. You were short of cash and turned him down. Instead, you searched the sandlots for youngsters to develop. You found one in peppery infielder Jimmy Dykes. But in 1920, down south for spring training, you decided that way was too slow. You would buy the players who could make the Athletics a pennant contender, even if it meant going into debt. Year by year, new stars were added to the rosters, the best pitchers you could buy, the best catcher, the most powerful hitters. In 1927, the greatest star of them all joined your club, the immortal Ty Cobb. Cobb's salary, $70,000 a year, but he was worth it. Now, after 13 lean years, you were ready to make a bid for the American League pennant. The season of 1927 began. You soon learned it would not be a year of victory. You were competing against an invincible team, the New York Yankees. With Babe Ruth lashing out 60 home runs, an all-time record, the Yankees finished first. They looked capable of continuing their record-breaking pace indefinitely. Had the huge sums spent to rebuild the Athletics been wasted? It was ironic to recall that Babe Ruth could have been on your team. You are now 65 years old. It seemed that for your remaining years in baseball, the Yankees would always stand between you and the pennant. Connie Mack had been discouraged in 1927. But 2 years later, the Athletics faced the Chicago Cubs in the World Series. Pitching ace Lefty Grove had won 20 games. The batting lineup contained great sluggers: Bing Miller, Mickey Cochrane, Al Simmons, Jimmy Fox. With Grove on the pitching staff were Quinn, Wahlberg, Rommel, and Earnshaw, an outstanding team. The first game of the series was played before President Herbert Hoover. There was one big question as Mack and Chicago manager Joe McCarthy shook hands. Who would be Connie's starting pitcher? He chose Howard Emke, a has-been. The fans were amazed, but Emke struck out 13 Chicago hitters, a new World Series record. The Athletics won the first game with ease and went on to capture the series. After 16 years, the World Championship, the applause was sweet to Connie's ears. Philadelphia expected another World Championship in 1930, and the city was not disappointed. But in 1931, it was a different story. In the World Series that year, the Athletics faced the St. Louis Cardinals. Connie's men were favored to win, but on the Cardinal team was a lad named Pepper Martin. The sports writers had nicknamed him the Wild Horse of the Osage. Living up to his nickname, Pepper Martin ran wild in that World Series. The A's pitching aces, Grove and Earnshaw, were helpless against him. Martin hit almost at will, ran the bases like a madman, and was flawless in the field. The Athletics fought back, tied the series. They could still win, but in the last game sparked by Martin's hitting and fielding, the Cardinals triumphed. It had taken Connie Mack 13 years to return to the top of the heap. That World Series defeat was the beginning of his slide back to the bottom. Connie went back to Philadelphia, and trouble. A depression gripped the country. Unemployed men sold apples in the streets. Money was scarce, and Connie couldn't meet his high-salaried payroll. Sorrowfully, he broke up his greatest team. Al Simmons, his great slugger, was sold. Infielder Jimmy Dykes was sold. Pitching stars Lefty Grove and George Earnshaw sold. His star catcher, Mickey Cochrane, sold. Jimmy Fox, one of the greatest sluggers of all, sold. They had to go. One bright spot in the picture. With Babe Ruth, you sailed to Japan in 1934, leading a team of American League stars to play against the Nipponese. You received a royal welcome. The Japanese rightly regarded you and Ruth as giants of the game. The Bambino demonstrated his batting form. He missed the first ball, then slammed one of his mighty homers. But it was only a pleasant interlude. 1937, President Roosevelt tossed out the first ball to start the new season. You were 74 years old. Had the time come to quit? Not yet. You wanted to win one more pennant. Spring training, 1939. Still pursuing that last pennant. Could you fashion a pennant-winning team out of these players? You tried hard, but didn't succeed. During that season, you were taken seriously ill in Boston, back to Philadelphia and the hospital. Was this the end? Was the grand old man of baseball through? It looked that way. But you recovered. The years rolled by. Now it was 1946. In spring training, you combed the newcomers for material to whip into a championship combination. But it was the same old story. No sluggers like Fox and Simmons. No pitchers like Lefty Grove. You showed the rookies how to handle the ball. But you knew before the season began that there would be no pennant this year. 1950, you faced the inevitable. 88 years old, you gave up managership of the Athletics to an old-time star, Jimmy Dykes. You couldn't have that last pennant, but you could look back on a lifetime of unequaled accomplishment in baseball. You had received many honors. Your wife had reason to be proud. From Judge Landis to President Will Harridge, the leaders of baseball had proclaimed you their peer. Your old friend, George M. Cohan, had written a popular song in your praise. You were Philadelphia's outstanding citizen. Your work had received international recognition. In 1949, the United Nations named you as Sports Father of the Year. To you had come the highest honor the national pastime can bestow, a place in baseball's Hall of Fame. There on a plaque listing the immortals of the game is the name of Connie Mack, placed there in recognition of your half-century of leadership. Although you had never won that last pennant, you received something far more precious, the title Mr. Baseball.